Hi there, how are you? Welcome to the Empowered Marriage Podcast. Great to have you on board. My name is Helen Harrison. You are listening to podcast number 48. And can a marriage last with no communication? Well, what do you think? It can, but will it be a very happy marriage? Will it be a very empowered marriage? Probably not. And so that's what I'm going to talk about today. What goes on in a marriage when there is no communication? By the time individuals and couples come and see me, there generally is no communication or not a lot. And if there is, it can be quite unhealthy. So they stay in that because at least there is some communication, even if they're attacking and having a go at each other. There is at least some communication. So what begins to happen when there is no communication? Well, first of all, of course, there is a loss in intimacy because, if there's no communication, there's no emotional connection, and then the physical connection gets a lot less. And it's very, very lonely. I mean, how do you feel when there's lost intimacy? You can feel quite unloved. You can be worried, you can be anxious, you can be stressed, you can be frustrated. There's a well of emotions that you can feel. You can also, if there's no communication, you can feel quite angry. Both of you can feel quite angry, and then you can attack each other and just feel quite resentful, and it just a whole mesh of really uncomfortable emotions. You can also, what I do see is infidelity can occur when there's no communication. And often it's not intentional. You're not going out looking for somebody, but you may be talking to a workmate at work and a friendship begins to build, and then it becomes more because you haven't got the communication at home. And that just begins to blossom outside the home environment. Also, when there's no communication, you can feel you're just not important, and you can feel really unloved. And for some people, that can bring up stuff from when they were little. They might have felt unloved. So it can bring up anxiety. So I think you're getting the picture. I'm painting a picture that it's quite negative. It's an energy that's heavy, it's toxic, it's life-taking. You'll hear me talk about life-taking and life-giving. Life-taking it's an energy that's really uncomfortable, negative, Drano. It doesn't feel good. Because, when you're in an empowered marriage, that is the foundation to then branch off and be able to bring beautiful other parts of your life. Your career may blossom. Your hobbies, interests, community, so many other things happen when you're in an empowered marriage. But when you are in a marriage or a relationship which is starting to be quite toxic, bland, boring, in a rut, and where there's no communication, it's a place where then it begins to affect everything. So the first thing I would say, if you're in that place, and actually I don't know if I've mentioned stress, you can feel quite stressed when you're in this place. It is absolutely crucial, I'd have to say it's the number one thing, is that you make your relationship a priority. So for a lot of people, when the relationship is starting to go down the rabbit hole, if you know that expression, you'll then throw yourself into other things. It could be into your work, into your career, into your hobby, into your whatever it is that you do, but it takes you away from your relationship and your marriage. So the first thing to ask is, okay, well, what do I want? Well, actually, I do want my marriage. Well, then you've got to make it a priority. That is the number one thing. I have couples in my office, and, over the years I've sort of watched, and I can see when a couple goes, you know what, this is really, really important to me. My relationship to me is important. I am going to make it a priority. You can just see it and feel it. Then there'll be other couples who, I've still got to work. And you know what? I do get that. I get that. However, it's the energy behind and making it a priority. And how can I stop working 80 hours a week or 60 hours a week to then bring in some balance so I can start putting some energy into my relationship, because it is really important to me. It's that whole energy that I want this. Apparently, I was reading earlier this week, research is that couples, they spend about 20 minutes a week on their relationship. And look, that has changed at the moment with COVID, but is it quality time that you're spending with your partner? Perhaps not. But I think that's horrifying. 20 minutes a week on something that is so important. So I'm going to give you some ways to begin communicating again. 7, actually. You would have heard these all before. However, it'll be up to you whether you make your relationship a priority, because you've got to begin communicating again. Number 1, I think love languages. I rattle on about this, but it's knowing what your love language is. So Google 5 love languages. You can buy it in a book. I'm sure you can do it online. But it's knowing what your love language is and knowing what your partner's love language is. And this could be a really good way to begin communicating again. So what are the 5 love languages? Okay. We have acts of service, quality time, physical touch, gifts, and words of affirmation. Those 5 love languages, for some couples I've seen over the years, when they focus on what their partner's love language is and they give them that, so they've worked out, I thought my partner's love language was acts of service. So I do all these wonderful things, but actually I've realised that my partner's love language is words of affirmation. So I've actually started putting some energy into that. I loved words of affirmation I really loved how words of affirmation. I'll give you an example. I'm just trying to think of something off the top of my head. Words of affirmation could be, I loved how yesterday you ironed all my shirts and you put them away for me. Thank you so much. Or I loved how you spoke to Billy, how you said, Billy, I love what you're doing there. What a fantastic job. And I love the way that you're speaking to your sister. So by you affirming your partner, if that's their love language, that just fills up the love tank. That's the whole idea of what I'm saying. Sometimes I'm not clear. I hope I am clear. But 5 love languages, that's the first step I'd encourage you to do if you've got no communication happening in your marriage. Your second would be intentional. So what I mean by be intentional is start spending time together. Intentional time. Begin with 5 to 10 minutes. Start with 5. Intentional. Phones off, children off, dogs off, TV off. I should do a song. But get it happening. Start turning everything off and you intentionally sit with your partner. How are you going? How are you really going? And you know what? It's going to take time, but little by little, you will begin sharing. And you'll get a little hit of feeling. You'll feel it. Might only be a few seconds. But then you'll begin to build on it. This didn't happen overnight that you stopped communicating. But something has happened. We've stopped caring enough to put in the energy and time to actually just sit. So be intentional. That's number 2. Number 3, avoid mind reading. Big one. Stop making assumptions. Actually ask. If they do a certain turn of their head or breathe a certain way and you've been reading it, ask. Or when your partner says something and you take it away with you and you're still with you 2 hours later, ask. It's huge. Stop mind reading. So that's the third thing. Fourth would be I statements and less you. I. Because when we do you, it's like blaming, attacking, criticising. Bring it back. I. Huge difference. So with all of these ways that I'm giving you, just pick a couple, because it can become a little bit overwhelming if you concentrate on too many things. Then once you've mastered a couple, then bring in another one and then bring in another one. But do it at your pace. And ideally as a couple if you can. But if you can't, just you do it. So let's go to the fifth way. Express negative feelings constructively. So we have feelings, unless you're numb. And that'll be another whole podcast. But it's being able to bring in I statements, but doing it constructively where you don't attack. You know, I'm feeling really sad. And I'm not sure where to go with this. But this is just what I'm feeling. And if you are on the receiving end, if someone's talking about feelings, don't leap in and try and fix it. Let them express them. And just sit as uncomfortably as you may feel. It's not about fixing. It's not about putting on your rescue hat. It's just allowing your partner to express and doing it with I statements. It's huge. It's so important. Sixth, listen without being defensive. That's a difficult one because you can feel it in the body. You can start to become quite defensive. However, if you want your partner to open up to you, and if you want your partner to talk about your inner feelings and their inner world, if they know that you're going to be able to cope with what they're saying and that you're not going to go to that defensiveness, because when we become defensive, it's like, oh, you can feel it and you want to throw it back. However, just breathe. Notice what's going on in the body. However, let your partner continue to share. It is huge. If you want to bring in intimacy and connection, and it's about not being defensive. You can just drop that so that your partner can safely and easily express to you. Big one. 7, freely express positive feelings. And that's a good one to begin with, actually. I don't know why I've put it as number 7, but I have. I'm talking about, can a marriage last with no communication? Well, it can, but it won't be happy. So it's about beginning to bring in communication again. So express positive feelings. And so it's openly using I statements. I'm just feeling really excited. Because, feelings, they move in and they move on. So express them as you're feeling them at that time. Hugely important, because can a marriage last with no communication? It can, but will it be happy? No, of course it won't be. It's particularly if you've got the belief that marriage, death do us part. So you're just going to stay in it. It's like you're doing time. Oh, I've been married for 30 years. But was it happy? Was it connected? Was it empowered? Perhaps not. We've got no communication, but we're still married. So it's getting clear on what you want and how you would like your marriage to change. And, sometimes it's easier said than done. But this is why I do these podcasts. And it's to educate and to empower individuals and couples to create the sort of marriage that you want. And if you had a room full of people and you asked them, do you want a marriage with no communication? Are any hands going to go up? No, of course not. So can a marriage last with no communication? Yes, it can, but it's not going to be happy. So it's putting in the work. So I'm going to recap the 7 steps to begin communicating again. Number 1, the 5 languages. Begin working on that. Number 2, be intentional about spending time together. Perhaps create a habit, 7:30 weeknights, or perhaps a couple of nights on the weekend where you're intentional. You turn everything off and you be together. Number 3, use more I statements and less you statements. Bring it back to I. Number 4, avoid mind reading. So stop making assumptions. 5, express your negative feelings, but do it constructively. 6, listen without being defensive. And perhaps you need to do work around that. If you are being defensive, perhaps there's some wounds there, perhaps there's some baggage, and you need to do some of your own work around that. And number 7, freely express your positive feelings. Because ultimately, it's about being able to be in your marriage where you are present, where you allow the flow of feelings in and then they move out. But there's no defensiveness or shutting any of it down. It's being able to feel it, being able to feel the flow of the feelings. And with that, you then, in your relationship, you are going to be able to express freely. You'll be able to be vulnerable. Beautiful place to get to. It really is. So, I hope this has been helpful. If it's been helpful, I'd love you to go to iTunes, do a review. The point of that is to encourage other people to listen to this podcast so that they can then learn, because a lot of it is education and then practicing it. Also go onto my website, powerofchange.com.au. You'll find everything you need there. I've got some great online courses. My Change My Life Self-Empowerment course is about being able to empower yourself so that then you can be in an empowered marriage. So if any of that speaks to you, have a look on my website. And anyway, I'm going to finish up there. Enjoy your life. I mean, I really believe that is so crucial. It's so important to get out of survival and that way of living and to live in that calm, thriving way where you can self-regulate yourself, you can be honest and open with your partner, and you can communicate freely. That's the key, where you communicate freely with yourself, be honest with yourself, and then you can be honest in your relationship and in your marriage. And on that note, I'm going to love you and leave you and enjoy living your empowered life in your empowered marriage.